There's a problem that almost every game in the action RPG genre faces at the moment, which is comparisons to the Dark Souls series. If your game is difficult, if enemies respawn whenever you reach a save point, if you leave behind puddles of some resource that you're collecting whenever you die, then you can all too easily be just branded as a Dark Souls clone. And on the one hand, that is fair enough. I mean, these are more than passing similarities, but developers also put in a lot of effort in order to come up with their own ideas and add and change this formula. So here's 6 things that make The Surge more than just another Dark Souls clone. The setting. Forgive me for being a little bit too obvious with this one, but The Surge isn't a medieval fantasy, but rather a science fiction dystopia. Signing on to the Creo megacorporation, which is so obviously evil from the moment you see their aspirational introduction video, things go south very, very quickly for Warren. The robots at this sprawling facility all go evil, and the fact that everybody has these neural implants to make use of exoskeletons seems to have been literally the worst idea, as the vast majority of the company's employees are now crazy robo-zombies. Deck 13 have tapped into inspirations from film, including District 9 for its grittiness, and Elysium and Edge of Tomorrow for all of that mech suit combat, creating something that really stands out from its peers. Next up is the combat. With the exoskeleton boosting Warren's physical strength, endurance and survivability, the combat feels weighty, but it can also range from being slow and hefty to fast and light, depending on your weapons. Either way, you'll be keeping an eye on your stamina bar. As an ordinary worker bee, it's all about repurposing those work tools that Warren has access to, so there's big arc welders, saws, hilariously big hammers, and so on. They don't make much sense, no, but did I mention that Creo are an obviously very shady company? But the combat is all about dismemberment. Locking on lets you then target individual limbs, and the accurate hit detection means that damage is dealt to each specific part of the enemy that you hit, or, in return, each part of you that the enemy hits. There's good reason for this, as you can then attack a part that's not armoured to deal more damage, or aim to hit a specific limb so that you can then scavenge that part of their exosuit for your own. You just need to land enough hits to build up the combat energy to pull off those finishes. And that brings us to the combat energy. Combat energy is a new meter to keep track of alongside your health and stamina. It is generated during battle by landing blows on enemies, building up over time, and it's got a few uses, whether it's pulling off the aforementioned finishing moves, or being converted into temporary buffs, or even health depending on your implants. The important thing to note is that you either use it or you lose it, because after a few seconds without landing a hit, that energy will start to drain away quite quickly, meaning you need to pay attention to how much energy you've got and make use of it while you can. Then there's the progression. In order to get better gear, you'll have to rip it off the cold, dead bodies of the robo-zombies that you come up against, one piece at a time, pulling these brutal finishing moves to do so. It's all to do with breaking the neural link or something like that, seeing as enemies catch on fire as soon as you kill them. What it boils down to is that if you want a particular set of armour, you'll need to collect the legs, arms, torso and helmet in order to be able to complete the entire set. But then you need to also collect more of each body part in order to collect the materials to create and upgrade them. You also need to get plenty of the more general tech scrap, that's souls just between you and me, and that's used for crafting, upgrades and levelling up Warren's exoskeleton power core. It doesn't take long to farm enough materials to do so, at least initially, but it's a nice way of wrapping the progression around the brutal dismemberment of the combat. The implants. These could also go under the progression system as well, but it's a nice little system in and of itself. Implants come in passive and active forms, and you find them tucked into corners of the world or taken from enemies. In fact, there's an implant that beeps whenever you get close to various pickups, which is pretty handy, but then there's those that increase combat energy generation or add a resistance to a particular type of damage, and so on. The active implants are more to do with health regeneration though. There's one that gives you 3 health boosts, which will no doubt feel quite familiar, but then there's others that can turn combat energy into stat buffs or, best of all, health. In other words, Deck 13 are saying that you can go for a more offensive style of play, and if you keep landing enough hits, you can turn that back into health to stay in the fight for longer. Next we come to the tech scraps, and this might not sound like a big deal, but the way that the Surge handles its tech scraps, which again is souls, is really quite nice. Yes, you drop a pile of scraps when you die and you have to get back to that spot to recover them, but the Surge gives you just 2.5 minutes to get there. So you either need to sprint past respawned enemies or fight your way through them. The benefit to fighting them is that it adds time back onto the clock and gives you more tech scraps in and of itself. That might seem like quite a harsh limit, but on the other hand, you can bank your scraps if you get to the medbay, meaning that you're not running around with thousands and thousands of scraps if you don't need to be. It doesn't prevent you from losing scraps entirely if you're not careful enough, but it does mean that you can play little and often and not be punished quite so heavily for dying. Tech scraps was the 6th point, but this final bonus point isn't really to do with the Surge, but with Deck 13 themselves. You see, they've really tried to listen and take on board feedback from the community and reviews of their previous game, Lords of the Fallen. Things like having a much faster weapon class allows people to have that ultra fast combat option which they were asking for, and that has really stemmed from the feedback that Deck 13 got. Lords of the Fallen wasn't really that well received, and so in a lot of ways, with Deck 13 now being able to take their time with the Surge, it's helped set them up for what we hope is a much better game. That's all for this video, but with the Surge out next week on the 16th of May, there's not that long left for another dose of Souls-esque action, and to discover if Deck 13 have managed to pull it off. In the meantime, we've got impressions from the first few hours of the game up on the 6thAxis.com and a preview video to go alongside it. Our review will also be live for next week. Before you go though, please do like, subscribe and share this video with your friends, and I hope you'll join us again soon. Goodbye!
Hope he chokes on it. First the drones, then John, and now the salaries. He's got a screw loose. He thinks we could get me again. One of these days I'm gonna grab my tools and tighten it for him.
Can't count how many times I've had to play dead out here. Nearly pissed my pants a couple of times.